Good evening, Western Standard viewers, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics show. It's Monday, January the 6th, 2025, and a happy new year to you all. There's a lot happening in Alberta right now, and with us to talk about it is the Western Standard's man in Edmonton, James Snell. James, welcome to the show.
Nigel, good to see you.
James, you're a bit unusual among political reporters in that before you started reporting on politics, you actually worked in politics. I want you to tell us about that. In fact, I think you ran for office once. Is that not right?
So Nigel, in my early 20s, I became frustrated with the economy of British Columbia, specifically in the Kamloops area. So I thought maybe I should run for office. Nobody else was challenging the mayor at the time. So I ran for mayor of Kamloops, BC. I came in second as a very young person, and just had a wonderful education and a good time running for mayor.
So what about your time at the War Room? And I think you were staffing Brian Jean as well, weren't you?
Right. So I was the content producer at the Canadian Energy Centre, and then I was a political staffer for Brian Jean. But what predates that is actually my work in earth science. So I started my working life as a mining exploration field technician. So taking soil samples, rock samples, looking for gold and base metals up in the Yukon, central BC, Vancouver Island. And so really I started my work life in very remote areas, jumping in and out of helicopters, sleeping in tents, working with wonderful people. And then after that, in the late 90s, I came to Alberta looking for a better life and better work. And I heard that well site geologists or geological consultants at well site supervising drilling were making $700 to $900 a day. So I thought, well, wouldn't that be great? So at the time I had about 6 geology courses. I was a college dropout, and I found favor actually in the oil patch and began a career as a geological consultant at well site. And so I did that for a long time, going to many small towns and remote areas and really taking care of the geological supervision of drilling for oil and gas wells. And so
okay. You've got credibility. There's no question about that. There are 3 things I particularly want to ask you about.
Sure.
The Alberta pension plan, how are the provinces doing? Are we going to end up with a deficit? And what do you see as Danielle Smith's biggest problems, or perhaps we should call them solution opportunities, in the year to come? So let's start with the Premier. I say she's had a good month doing the Prime Minister's job on the border. They love her on Fox News. And you say?
I think she's carrying herself like a head of state. She sounds great. She looks great. She's doing her job. And so, yeah, I think she's doing a good job. As far as the Alberta pension plan goes, you know, this is really still a dream that could happen in the distant future. It certainly has provoked the NDP as being quite unpopular. But I think in the grand scheme, the reason for an Alberta pension plan is that Canadian finances have been managed very poorly. And that poor management of Canadian finances has created a lot of worry in Alberta about the future existence of the Canadian pension plan, as I understand.
Well, just in the week before Christmas, the Canada's chief actuary gave an opinion and said that Alberta was not entitled to half of the assets of the Canada pension plan. And of course, the whole scheme was originally based upon receiving what we had overpaid over the decades into the CPP. But the actuary did say that we might be entitled to half of what we had been asking for, which I think is in the area of $200 billion was her number. That seems like it might be the basis for an Alberta pension plan. Do you think people here in Alberta want it?
Some do and some don't. I think that the truth is, in the grand scheme, that Alberta, to a large extent, has been picking up the tab for Confederation for a long time. We've been pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into the rest of Canada. And I think there's a growing frustration among the electorate that Alberta has been pulling more than its weight for a long, long time. And so I think that frustration has really given rise to the idea of an Alberta pension. As far as the chief actuary is concerned, I don't really know. This person is a bureaucrat, taking a paycheck from the government of Canada. So has this individual been weaponized like ECCC has been weaponized against Alberta? I don't know.
Actually, James, I thought that it was so surprising that they conceded that Alberta even had a case, and that as much as $200 billion might be due us. For a federal civil servant to say that struck me as remarkable. But the thing is, this is something that is going to be a very hard sell across the rest of the country. One province would be perceived as getting what it wanted at the expense of all the others. A very difficult political decision for the national government, whether it's the Liberal government, which obviously would reflexively react to anything that was proposed by Premier Smith, but difficult as well for a Conservative government, don't you think?
Well, sure. But Nigel, this is still a dream that could or might happen sometime in the distant future. I think the Premier has bigger fish to fry. Right now, we have thousands of people pouring into Alberta every month from left-wing jurisdictions like Toronto and BC. These folks are settling in Calgary. They're settling in Edmonton. So if I were the Premier, I would get busy winning over voters and making sure those seats are better off going into the next election.
Yes, well, it's a weird thing that if you're so sick of the left-wing government in Ontario that you would move to Alberta and bring your left-wing point of view with you to kind of recreate what you just left behind here in the province that works. So it's hard to understand what people are thinking. But let's talk about a very important conservative value that the government of Alberta espouses. It talks a good game about fiscal responsibility.
Sure.
But even their friends at the Fraser Institute say they're spending too much money. And if energy prices, they don't have to collapse, they just have to go down. And the government will suddenly find itself in deficit. So you've been looking at the numbers. Are we heading for the rocks?
Maybe. The Premier doesn't have a choice, though, Nigel. We've had upwards of 500,000 people come to Alberta over the last several years. That's more than the city of Red Deer, or pardon me, that's like 4 or 5 equivalent Red Deers coming to Alberta. So that's a problem and a blessing. So the Premier, the government of Alberta, they've got to spend money on healthcare for these people. They've got to spend money on education for these folks. So the province has no choice but to spend billions to support these newcomers. Is this a good thing in the long term? I would argue yes, because a lot of these people are looking for the same things I was looking for when I came to Alberta. They're looking for a better life. They're interested in working. They're interested in starting businesses for the most part. So right now, there's some short-term pain in terms of what Smith and her colleagues are going to have to spend. But there is, I think, a long-term gain potentially. But again, there's a real trick, right? Because a lot of these people are coming from Ontario. They're coming from BC. And how are they going to vote, Nigel, in the next provincial election? I think that's a great question. So Alberta prosperity, it's good, but it's a double-edged sword.
As I say, I know when I came from BC, as I crossed the border, I stopped the car, got out, looked at the sign, got down on my knees, kissed the ground, and carried on into Alberta. Let's just hope that people are glad to be here. Of course, they're going to be working too, so they're going to be paying taxes. Now, doesn't this fund itself?
Does growth pay for itself? does population growth pay for itself? In the long term, potentially. In the short term, you got to build classrooms, you got to build schools, you need a way of finding primary care doctors and nurses for hundreds of thousands of new people. So is our healthcare system in trouble? Yes, it is. Can you write a check to solve that problem? No, you cannot. There are broader issues. So, yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, broader issues like just finding people who can provide the service, the doctors, the nurses, and everybody associated.
Sure.
So there's as people pour in, there are some bills to be paid. It's okay over the long run, I think you're saying, but in the immediate future, there needs to be an investment. And I think just about 3 months ago, did she not make an investment in new schools?
I believe it was billions. Yes.
Yes.
And
Okay.
but of course, there's no satisfying the NDP, right? I mean, we could turn Alberta into a giant hospital and a giant school, and it still wouldn't be enough for the NDP.
No, that's certainly so. Look, all of these things, if people are moving in, they want to come in for work, they want jobs, they will pay taxes. That's how it's financed. And so we need to be strong on economic development. We don't have unlimited time. I want to ask you overall how you think this government is doing. Premier Smith obviously is, what is it now, 2.5 years in office. Seems very popular, but are they meeting their goals and are people getting what they voted for?
Well, I think the situation in Alberta is dynamic and constantly changing. Particularly as we see thousands of people coming to the province every month. So, as far as the dynamic changes that are happening, Alberta government's doing a great job, I think. As far as the overall economy, I think they're doing a good job.
Well, let's be a little bit more specific here. There are some issues which are very important. They're ideological issues that very important to Premier Smith and the people closest to her. For example, the reconstruction of the health system, the Sovereignty Act, the amendments to the Alberta Human Rights Act. But when you talk to people on the street, yeah, that's great, good. I'm glad we got more rights. Yeah, Sovereignty Act. Yes, let's stand up to Ottawa. When are you going to drop the taxes on gasoline? And so there are government issues and there are people issues. So are they getting to the people issues that they need to get to?
As best they can, I think, Nigel. There's a lot of money going out the door right now to finance Alberta and to finance our operations. And I will say again, there are, as I've been told, at least 2 Saudi Arabias in this province. There should be no government debt in Alberta. We are wealthy beyond imagination. And so even having a conversation about finances and whether or not we have enough money to bankroll healthcare, education, programs for immigration, even having that conversation is a little bit depressing given the fact of the wealth that we are sitting on. And I hope that Albertans wake up, and I hope that the Premier and her staff wake up to the fact that we are an extraordinarily wealthy jurisdiction. We should be at the top of the stack, not just in Canada, but we should be at the top of the stack globally.
So why aren't we?
We're getting there. Right now, Alberta is a beacon of hope, once again, for people from all over Canada. There's a reason people are coming here, Nigel. They're coming to Alberta because it's a land of opportunity, as it has been over the decades. And so it's, people are coming here for hope. And so if the premier can get reelected, this
Well,
is
I
all.
think you're right
This
that that's why
all
people do come here. It's why you came here. It's why I came here. But it doesn't alter the fact that you're in a resource-based economy, which we are.
yeah.
When prices are up, we have money, and then we start to pay more for things. And then when prices drop, we still have those bills, but we no longer have the revenue, and we start slipping into deficit. I mean, I remember the great day when Rolf Klein held up that big piece of plywood, debt paid. That was only 20 years ago. And of course, you've seen the fluctuations in the economy since then. It left us where we are. What's the current provincial debt? 80 billion, 70 billion, something like that.
Yeah, we shouldn't be in debt.
No, I agree. But so obviously we haven't learned to put the money away when we're doing well, pay for when we are not doing well.
Nigel, I think we all know there's going to be ups and downs in the economy. There will be ups and downs in commodity prices. And so we're going to have to, as they say, make hay while the sun shines. But it seems that Alberta is doing a fairly good job of economic diversification. We have booming tech center in Calgary. We've got AI data centers potentially being built that are absolutely enormous, that could generate untold employment and tax revenue. So I think we're doing a good job. But here's the fact, is that the world is going to need oil and gas for decades and decades and decades to come. Alberta has some of the largest oil and largest natural gas reserves on the planet. So what we need to do is we need to get more of this product, not just to our American neighbors, but we need to get this to international markets. And that means playing ball with whoever they elect in British Columbia. God knows who it will be next time. But we've got one natural LNG project coming online on the west coast of BC, while the rest of the world has entered this market, which is critical. And I might add, Nigel, that natural gas is a lot cleaner burning than coal. And there are hundreds of coal-fired power sites being built all over the world right now. So we need to get much cleaner Canadian natural gas out to international markets. And we need to have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 LNG sites out on the West Coast, because we have a lot to offer the world. And so in some ways, and it frustrates me to say this, we have this Montney play and we have the analogs of the Montney, but we really have more than we need. And this product needs to go to the rest of the world. And if we can figure out a way to do that, if we can get our shit together in confederation, then Alberta and Canada will be a lot better off financially. So this wealth isn't just for Alberta, it's for the rest of Canada as well. And the fact that we are sitting on at least 2 Saudi Arabias and running $1 trillion plus national debt is a joke, and it is a travesty. Canada is a wealthy country. Alberta is a wealthy jurisdiction, and people need to realize that. And getting that product out to international markets is not a sin, it's a good thing.
Well, I think you have just lifted us out of the area of provincial jurisdiction and into the area of how are we going to get rid of a federal government that prevents us from doing all the good things that you have just described. So not a bad note to go out on. James, welcome to the Western Standard. We're very much looking forward to seeing your work over the weeks and months to come. And this conversation has been a great start. So
thank you, Nigel. It's a pleasure to sit down and chat with you.
Well, and I think we'll be doing this as the weeks and months go by, because our focus is certainly in Western Canada and in what the governments here are doing. So anyway, thanks for all that. For the Western Standard, I'm Nigel HANNAFORD.